Hello there, and welcome to the ClueCon Weekly podcast studio. I'm in here today with Len Graham. How are you doing today, Len?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Pretty good, thank you. Pleased to be here and excited to have a two-time Dangerous Demo winner in the room with me today, and we'll get on to talking about that before too long, I'm sure, Len. But I wanted to start off by asking you, where are you joining us from today?
I'm outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Oh, sounds like a very nice place to be. And what sort of weather have you got there?
Today it's a little cooler. It's about 70 degrees Fahrenheit.
That sounds very, very nice at the moment. As you perhaps know, I'm speaking to you from Brazil, where I've got about 90 or 95, and it's feeling just a bit warm here. So
That's a little.
I could do with a bit of that coolness. Now, Len, I wanted to ask you about your background as well. I know you're currently a member of the team at FusionPBX, but can you tell us how you got involved in telecom and then found your way into the open source stuff that you're involved with now?
Well, I started early. Back in the early 2000s, I worked for a third-party company that was contracted for VoiceStream, which is now T-Mobile. And what I did is I helped with activations and billing. And then I picked up on information pretty quick, and I was the guy that everyone went to for help. They're like, how do you do this? How do you do that? Or one of the vendors would call in and say, yeah, they would call in and say, I can't get this phone activated, and make sure the SIM cards were right and things like that. And that didn't last too long. Unfortunately, with third-party companies, they sometimes just go out of business. So they had some internal issues, and the company just abruptly closed. So after that, I looked around for a little bit, and I found Adelphia, which is now Comcast. So I made myself ventured into the multiple service operator, MSOs, cable company. Right. Which does cable TV, internet. Back then was long distance, so that was always fun to try to sell people. Would you like to lower your bill today? So it's kind of like I started to scratch the surface with like telecom kind of services, a little bit with cell phone, and then more with telecom with Adelphia. And then things like high-speed internet started to ramp up. They were getting away from dial-up. They would do this thing where they would have the upstream, I believe, with dial-up, and then the downstream would be with the cable internet.
Oh.
And it was a blazing 128K, I think it was. Very fast at the time. Yeah.
Old days.
Yeah, they called it PowerLink.
Right.
And so there I started to learn more about features and benefits and selling cable TV and internet services and email, because email was really big at that time too. And then I found myself in another position where the company was closing. They had some issues with the government, so they had to sell to someone else, and Comcast bought them. Comcast already has this mega infrastructure of call centers and stuff in place, so my tiny call center didn't exist anymore. So I can either move to another state or find another job. So I found another job. And that's why I transitioned into Atlantic Broadband. They were a small company they purchased from Charter Communications. So they got an investor. It was real tiny in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And I worked there for over 10 years. And I started doing support for internet service. And then I grew with the company. as the products started to expand, the staff expanded, and budgets expanded. So there was one large budget between two different departments, between engineering and advanced services group, where I ended up transitioning into from that. So there would be times that I would be doing desktop services, upgrading RAM for a computer for one of the workstations for one of the customer service reps, or getting rid of a virus, or doing patches or installing software for another department, while taking some calls, talking to technicians that were called, like the field technicians would call in to activate modems and email addresses. And then we launched in the phone service, and it was a proprietary system. And we launched, I think we got 30,000 subscribers, I think, in 1 year. So we were rapidly
sounds like pretty good going.
Yeah, and this was a time where the evil empire was Verizon, and people were spending like $40-$60 a month, and we had the service that was basically voice over IP, which they call digital phone because it worked through a phone modem, through an MTA. And so then we learned about all kind of telecom things, like hosted phone numbers to ported phone numbers, to whenever you port a phone number in, and all the fun things that other carriers like to do when they don't want to let a subscriber go and point fingers and say, hey, it's the other guy. When we have the ads, right? It's like, and all kind of geographical things, like, well, the phone number there, the area code, and what is that, the NNX and NPP or something? I forget exactly what it was.
Yeah,
it had to be
NAMPA,
right? And it's like, well, we have to give you a new phone number because Verizon or whoever didn't put you in the right area because 20 years ago they didn't care. But now the FCC says you have to. And so we did a soft launch with residential, and then brought it into commercial. And I started to advance into commercial services that did fiber circuits and commercial phone and hotel support. Different hotel chains would have wireless service. It would come up on a caller ID, Holiday Inn, and we'd say, oh, thanks for calling Holiday Inn support.
Oh, great stuff. Yeah. They have, hotels have their own sort of set of requirements, don't they, for internet and telephony, different lots of other places.
They would have walled gardens, and they would have different devices, and those devices wouldn't authenticate with walled garden, and you have to make exceptions, and it was fun, I guess you could say. But from there, when I got more into commercial services, we found that there were they would have our service and other PBXs, and one that would come up would be like this thing called free switch. Like what is free switch? And so I came into a problem where one of our customers had an issue with one of the feature codes weren't working, and it turned out to be an option with the PBX that had the same feature code as us. But it took digging into free switch, because I wanted to find something that was free because I didn't have a budget, and my employer didn't want to give me the time to pursue this problem, even though it was a customer that had called in multiple times, and I wanted a resolution. I don't like where you just pass the buck. It's too common that I found in the industry I was in. Say, well, wait till the day shift comes, or when the day shift comes, I'll wait for the night shift to come. And
Yeah, kicking the problem into the long grass and not actually dealing with it.
So I wanted to, I wanted to fix this problem. It's just one of those itches I had to scratch. And so I looked for something that was free, and I was like, oh, there's this thing called open source. I'm like, but what is open source? And so I looked a little bit more, and there's FreeSwitch, and I tried to install FreeSwitch, and I couldn't. So a little bit later, I found FusionPBX, because I'm a graphical kind of person and less of command line, and everything I did was Windows based. So what I ended up doing was getting it working on FreeSwitch running on Windows, which at the time I found an executable that it just booted up, which was outdated. I didn't realize at the time, but it worked. And then I patched in Nginx and then PHP and then FusionPBX into that mix. And I was able to replicate the problem. Like, oh, so they have this feature set that's interfering, and I was all excited. I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is it. Next day at work, I called the customer, and lo and behold, that was it. It was just a simple store code that was interfering.
Right, and was it that their PBX was squirreling away the star code and not getting it through to your free PBX? Sorry, your free switch, or was it that they were actually on a free switch, and the star code was getting taken by free switch and not passed to the PBX?
Right. It was taken from. It was like FreeSwitch was taking precedence. Like the phone was talking to FreeSwitch, and then somehow it was going through our phone system, which baffled me. It's like, why are you paying for two services? But customers are customers.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, well, I'm glad. That's a good story of fixing something for somebody and making great progress. So, we've got to a part of the story where you got involved with FusionPBX, but your dangerous demo contributions have been as a FusionPBX guy. So, how did you make that move?
Well, I started with documentation with FusionPBX, because one of the things that I did at Atlantic Broadband was training. Not so much the entire company as far as training, but within the department. Like we launched wireless, just wireless routers, and we used Cisco routers, and they were just off the shelf routers. So a lot of times customers would call in with router issues and would want us to support a router that, there's so many different routers out there, different configurations and issues and buttons and firmware. And the company found it was just easier to, run something that we knew inside and out. So yeah, they looked at me because I like to jump into things. I like to take things apart and see how they work. They're like, here, Len, take this and, put something together to train, coworkers and field technicians. So I did that. I put, a PowerPoint together and did some hands-on training to do the installation. So from that experience, I'm like, well, there's this cool product that really has a little bit of documentation to it. I'm like, where is this all at? And then I didn't realize that people have to contribute to the documentation. Someone isn't really going in and, it wasn't their job to go in and do documentation. Where you can say, well, you develop code, you can do the documentation also, but most people that develop code don't do documentation that I find. It's kind of rare to have both, because it's usually the documentation is in the code. Yeah. And that's one thing I found with some of the FreeSwitch, like FIFO, a lot of the documentation is in the code. But I started to, chip in. I was like, there's this cool this project, and maybe I can help, since it helped me. So I want to help give back. So I started. There was a wiki at the time, and I started to just fill in some of the blanks and try to link things together. And there was a transition at the time from that into GitHub. One of the members. FusionPBX members suggested, hey, there's this new thing called GitHub. you really got to move everything over to. You got to move the code because it was the code itself was hosted on Google code base. Was that Google SVN? I think it was.
SVN is certainly a repository tool.
So that Google was closing that because Google just likes to close things for no reason. Or I'm sure there's a reason, but it doesn't make sense to everyone else that's using it. So we decided to, well, since that's getting moved over, let's move over the documentation too. And we were going to use, or not we, they were going to, Mark was going to use, I think just the regular built-in thing that GitHub has, but I think another member suggested using read the docs. And that was the plan, and everything was set up. Someone had set it up for Mark, and it just sat there, and no one contributed. And at the time, I was out of work, and I was just kind of, looking for work, and Mark's like, well, I have this documentation, no one's really contributing to it, and I don't mind giving back, but I don't want that to be something that's exploited. There's the unfortunate part of open source is people like to exploit it. Not everyone, but there is a certain group of people out there that will jump from project to project and just take the goodness of people for
the takers.
So he's like, well, I give you some money to put this together. We're going to migrate over things that are still current because there's a lot of outdated information on the old wiki. I think FreeSwitch went through the same thing. As the code base it evolves over time, things just don't make sense anymore, and things get deprecated. So the code updates, but so the documentation has to update also. So through Mark's direction, he says, let's move over this, and I was like, okay. So I move it over and freshen it up a little bit, and then Mark thinks, well, there's more with that we can do. Let's take the menu and make the documentation match FusionPBX's menu. So even though FusionPBX's menu at the time was at the top, our documentation is on the side. Well, so it would be on this side.
Right.
And then we treat the documentation as code, which is kind of neat. You can see the pull requests and the things that were changed. So it builds like a history, so you can go back and see what was changed. And so if you ever need to go back, but that's how I started to get into FusionPBX, was documentation. And I didn't know. Like I didn't know
documentation.
I'm sorry?
A bit of documentation and revision control by the sound of things.
Right, yeah. And at the time, I didn't know GitHub. I didn't know read the docs, so it was like a steep learning curve. But after time and, pretty much with anything, once you start to do more, then you become more comfortable with it. And so during this time, I'm thinking, I'm making money, but I don't really have any sort of company or, this receiving money, which, the government's like, if you're receiving money, we need to tax you. So I thought, I'm getting this gig of, contract kind of work. I thought I better, start a company. So I started like a sole proprietor, Telecom. So during my employment search to help with not having a gap, I started FusionPBX, or not, I didn't start FusionPBX. I started Telecom.com. And it's something that I can start building on my resume also. So I would say, documentation, maybe I would go to an interview and say, well, what have you been doing? So I was like, well, I have this company, I'm doing contract work. And then that eventually got me a contract with the state of Pennsylvania for the Department of Corrections, which I started.
Great news.
Yeah, I became one of the IT guys for one of their institutions, which I don't recommend ever doing. But it was like the technical aspect of it was awesome. I loved the technical aspect of that job because it was like a mini city. So you would have like an educational part of it where people would take their GEDs. So I would have a GED server to take care of the internal network, QuickBooks, and maintain the server updates. And eventually they were migrating into VDI and
right.
another resume builder. And I did that part-time with FusionPBX contracting. I did part-time. One of the cool things about Mark is he would let me take the training also for free. So Mark would have these admin and advanced training, so which really helped the project in the end because it trained me to understand the document, like how to document better, because you can see something and say, well, you can't really explain something unless you really know a lot about it. So the more you know about it, the better you can explain it. So some of the documentation may not be as good as other parts because I didn't understand it as well.
Yeah, well, that's a good introduction. Thank you very much for that, Len. And now let's talk a little bit about your exploits in the world of dangerous demos. And I know you've got your most recent one there, but can you tell us about your first dangerous demo last year first before we move on? Because your one this year kind of followed on from last year's in a way, didn't it?
Yeah, well, last year I wasn't present. There was some stuff going on that didn't make it possible for me to participate. But
Sorry,
the year
the
before,
year before.
that's where I was able to go to ClueCon in person, which was like, the stars aligned, and I was able to go, and with the help of the kindness of FusionPBX and the kindness of the people at FreeSwitch, made it possible for me to be there. And I was able to help out and set things up. But dangerous demos, like it wasn't a plan. James Bodie likes to bring you into things. He does.
He likes to go around reeling people in, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's got a really good skill set with that. And initially, I'm just a guy that's at ClueCon that does FusionPBX. At the time, I was still a contractor, so I couldn't say I work for FusionPBX. I'm like, I'm a guy that works with FusionPBX. But Mark's like, he had this presentation, and I was like, okay, I can help you with the presentation. He was going to demonstrate with, I think it was WebRTC with the QR code thing he just made, and for the GrandStream Wave soft phone, and I was going to help with that. But when James Bodie asked Mark what he was going to do, he's like, "Oh, I'm going to install FusionPBX," and James Bodie wasn't going to have any of that. Like, that's not dangerous. What were you thinking? And he's like, "You can't do that. Come back to me, and it starts in an hour." And so Mark looked at me, and I'm like, "We haven't had lunch yet. We should go eat lunch." So we went to lunch and talked over lunch to think of what to do. And so through brainstorming and I guess bouncing ideas off of each other, we came up with the idea of a Raspberry Pi Zero W wrapped in bubble wrap. And it was with the Raspberry Pi had FusionPBX and FreeSwitch on it. So we were going to demonstrate FusionPBX running on a Raspberry Pi as people threw it around the room.
That was amazing, an amazing idea. I don't know whether necessity was the mother of invention there, or the short time scale that you were given, but it's become an iconic and much talked about dangerous demo there.
Yeah, it was really really awesome. I still get a smile when I think about the process. It was last minute, and Mark ran up to the UPS store within the hotel that we were in, and he bought all kind of bubble wrap, and I ran the other direction up to the hotel room as Mark had me work on the Raspberry Pi for packages for the Raspberry Pi. At the time, there weren't any packages to install on Debian for Raspberry Pi, and that was one of the tasks that Mark had me do was
Right.
do like make a repository so you can just do apt-get install like you do for other architectures. So
Yes.
he's like, we needed something for ARM HF, and it compiled it. I think a 32-bit version for Raspbian. At the time, it was Debian 8. So we have this thing with Debian 8 on the Raspberry Pi, and I was like, oh, I can bring it to market and and show them, because I was like excited that it was on this Raspberry Pi 0W, because it's like, well, it has like 512 mega RAM, and just to see FreeSwitch run on that was impressive. I was like, this is so cool. I get to bring it. So it just happened that I had that, and then I'm like, we can use this. Mark is like, but I don't know, like, how are we gonna throw this around the room without hurting people? He's like, come on.
Yeah, it was great, and as I was saying, everybody remembers it, and the demo actually worked, didn't it? As the thing was getting kicked around or thrown around, I think you're able to add extensions and things.
Yeah, it worked to a certain point. There was a few things that I missed. I think Failed got us in the end, because we changed IPs from the hotel network to the presenter network.
Right.
And
these sort of things are sent to try us, Len.
But the majority of things worked, and people had a blast. I took this thing, I threw it out to the crowd, and I love like interacting with people. I love a lot of times you can go to a conference and you can sit there and it's so technical. The technical part of it is awesome, but you can feel yourself drifting. Just thinking about
that's right.
one's lunch, and then maybe you miss a key part of the talk. It's like, oh, I missed a key part of that talk. You hope it's recorded. But I like interacting with things. I'm like, we can really interact with the crowd with this, and people loved it. And I was a little worried because there's people with laptops, and people would have drinks. I'm thinking, what happens if they knock your drink over, or and then someone almost got knocked in the side of the head with it. Someone drop kicked it. I think it was.
I think it was Andy Abramson that did the drop kick part from the back of the room. I remember that part. Yeah,
and,
a lot of fun.
And I think it.
And sorry, go ahead.
I think it hit Carol. She was from, I think, the Chicago Institute of Technology.
Right, but I'm guessing being bubble wrapped, there was no damage to her or the pie.
Mr. Jarris had a lighter and got a lighter up to it, and like, wow, this demo's on fire.
And of course, you were a winner as well. Do you remember the prize? I don't remember the exact prize you won. Do you remember the nature?
I think we won the most creative. Or like
that would be a word.
Proud, or I forget the name of it. There's like 3 different ones. It was like the most most creative or something.
Yeah, indeed. Anyway, we're running out of time here because we're having fun chatting, but we need to move on to this year's dangerous demo as well. And I believe you've got it somewhere near your person, the thing that you did the dangerous demo with this year.
Yep, this one. This time I did. It it was more of a solo act. There was less of Mark and all of me, I guess you could say.
Right.
Mark gets really busy, so I think that's why he wasn't able to join us. But this has a camera. Oh, this is a Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to see. And this is the camera. You see the red light showing that it's on. And then this travels through a ribbon cable down into the Raspberry Pi. And then the power comes out here into a power bank, which this lasts about 6 hours, which I was surprised.
Right, and that's light enough for the frisbee to still be able to be thrown.
Yeah, that was a big concern because I tried this power bank, which didn't work out too well. It was pretty heavy. And
Right.
what I ended up getting was this power bank.
Right, a bit of a smaller one in terms of capacity and physical size.
I got a second one because I liked it so much. It's, it's real lightweight and thin.
Cool,
yeah, it's like light. You can throw it around, but
yeah, that's very cool. Now I think you've got a screen share set up so you can show us some of the things around the demo this time. I'll just go and turn the screen over to you so you can be on there. And now I've done that, so we should have you in the top. We do.
Okay. So this is the FusionPBX installation on this Raspberry Pi, and this SSH window here is into the Pi itself. And I'm on the Pi, and
oh yeah,
I added a camera to it, which you can throw around and. Which I had my daughter help with the presentation. I'm like, take this throughout the house and throw it, and please try not to break anything. So it added
I remember that.
A little bit more danger to it because stuff can break. But one of the other, I guess I should backtrack a little bit. What my mindset on this was is I wanted to try to reuse the same thing, and kind of evolve it a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, how do I participate with an audience that's all remote? And I'm thinking, well, maybe I can add a camera to it. I'm thinking I haven't done that before. So I did some research and I was able to add a camera to it. And it uses an RTSP stream that I streamed to VLC. And that's how I got the camera part of it. And I also did the game theory. I did a game theory entry. Which
yeah,
I think it was
we
you.
Were very pleased to have you involved on that. Then.
Yeah, I think it was you or someone that said that during the conference, you're like, if you have these two things, you can put them together. Like if you have a game theory and the dangerous demo, you're welcome to do them. Put them together. I'm like, oh, cool, I can do this. So. That's what I did. I made a game theory game that uses the PHP relay, and what I did is I used the example from Kevin Garabedian, and I took that example and I adjusted it to where you can do DTMF, and then it recognizes the caller ID. What I wanted to add to it that I didn't have enough time to get done was after you were done playing a game, it would text you and say, thank you for playing. So that's one thing that I didn't get done that I wanted to do. But I had to learn a little bit of. I'm no coding expert by any means. I do like development for phone templates. For the phone templates for VoIP phones. So I can code a little. So I used that kind of to do the game theory. So it was a little confusing at first because whatever I was trying to do, when you press a number, map it to this command, and then play a sound. And whenever I initially tried that, it didn't work. It would push a number, and before you push the number, the audio would play. I'm like, well, why is this playing? As soon as I would call, the audio would play. It's like I didn't push a number yet. And
Right.
so I had to tweak that a little bit and put it within the code. And
You've
this
got it
is
optimized.
the
Oh, sorry, I took it off screen share. Let me just pop it back on screen share so we can see. Okay, there we hold on.
well, this is the I'm SSH'd into my tablet, which I have the code running on.
Actually, oh yeah, we're on the screen share now. Yeah, we got you up, and we can see you in the top corner, so we can see the tablet as well.
Okay, but there's this part of the code there that I use.
Right.
And I did the coding on a tablet, which is running custom Android software. And this used to be an HP touchpad that ran WebOS. And in the nature of things, I have free switch running on this also.
Do you want to show us the screen again? I've put you back to the bigger picture now, so you're not screen sharing, and you can show us the screen of the tablet. That'd be great.
I'm sorry, share which?
The tablet that you were holding, the screen of the tablet.
Sure. It's installed using, I think it's pronounced Termux.
Right.
And it has Debian 10, and it's like in a CH root environment, I guess you could say. But
Yeah,
it has like on-screen keyboard, so you can just tap away. And this on the other SSH window, I'm SSH into this right now. So
right.
This is nice to take with you, but it's a pain to code on.
Yeah, I can imagine. When you're in the heat of that. All right, well, Len, thank you very much for showing us that. As you mentioned, not only a dangerous demo man, but in the game theory as well. And I know everybody was very grateful for your contributions, and you're a valued member of the Free Switch community, coming along on our ClueCon Weekly Cafe, as well as today, the ClueCon Weekly Studio. Were you just, okay, that was your prize, wasn't it, for being the winner? Well done, man.
I can't go without saying thank you. Because even though I didn't come in first place, I came in second place, and this is okay for me. My decision to get that was kind of influenced by my kids. They're like, we want the Switch, Dad.
I can imagine that. I can imagine. Well, look, it's time for us to go, but thank you very much for joining us. And also, thank you very much for joining us on the ClueCon Cafe every week on Friday at 10 a.m. Central. Always grateful to have you along and to share that experience together. But for now, then, 2 times dangerous demo winner and game theory man as well, it's time to say bye-bye. So thanks very much, and see you next time.
All right, thank you.